The Los Angeles sky was gray, as heavy as the city's concrete blocks. Michael Fort, a man with salt and pepper hair and hands calloused from long days of fixing cars, was hunched under an old Mustang in a small garage on Sunset Boulevard. The neon light cast a glow on his angular face, and his sharp blue eyes seemed always vigilant. Even though his life was now just engine oil and the radio's hum, Michael was once a CIA agent, a ghost hidden in top-secret operations. But now he chose tranquility, trying to forget his past of blood and fire. The garage belonged to Henry Brooks, a kind owner who treated Michael like a brother. Henry's daughter, 17-year-old Emma Brooks, often dropped by the garage after school, bringing her radiant smile and stories about her classes. Today, Emma walked in, her jeans skirt swaying, listening to pop music on her headphones. "Uncle Michael, are you done with my dad's car yet? Dad said you'd get an earful if you're slow," she joked, tossing him a can of soda. Michael caught it cleanly, smiling faintly. "Kiddo, I work faster than I used to dodge bullets." But the cheerful atmosphere didn't last long. Tires screeched on the street outside. 3 black SUVs pulled up in front of the garage, their tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. Michael narrowed his eyes, his hand unconsciously tightening around a wrench. 4 men got out, dressed in black suits and sunglasses, their gait menacing. The leader, a man with a scar on his face, pulled a handgun from his jacket. "Where's Henry Brooks?" His voice was cold as steel. "Emma Punisted," backing away behind the counter. Michael stood up, wiping his hands on a rag, his voice calm. "The boss isn't here." "What do you want?" the scarred man sneered, pointing the gun at Michael. "None of your business." "Mechanic." But Michael didn't flinch. He glanced at Emma, signaling for her to run to the back door. The scarred man noticed and shouted, "Get the girl!" Another man lunged forward, grabbing Emma before she could escape. Michael acted instantly. He threw the wrench, hitting the gunman's wrist and making the gun fall. In a flash, he rushed forward and punched the scarred man square in the face, the dry crack of breaking bone echoing through the garage. The other 2 men pulled out knives, but Michael was faster, kicking the knife from one man's hand before putting the other in a chokehold and slamming his head onto the workbench. All 3 lay groaning on the floor, but the 4th man had dragged Emma into a car, and the SUV sped off in a cloud of smoke. Henry ran in from the back room, his face pale. "Emma, what did they do to my girl Michael?" Didn't answer right away. Picking up the fallen gun from the floor and checking the ammunition. "I'll find her. You stay here and call the police." Henry grabbed his arm, his eyes red. "Michael, you know I trust you. Save Emma. Please." Michael nodded, his eyes sharp and cold. He knew his past was calling, even though he had tried so hard to bury it. Michael drove the garage's old pickup truck, following the SUV's tire tracks through the streets of Los Angeles. He stopped on a street corner, opened the truck's toolbox, and took out an old bag. Inside was a Beretta handgun, a combat knife, and a GPS tracker he used to use back in his agent days. He connected the device to his phone and hacked into the city's traffic cameras, old skills that had never faded. An SUV matching the description appeared on the screen, heading toward the port of Long Beach. At the port, Michael hid behind some shipping containers, observing. A group of men were loading wooden crates onto a ship, while Emma stood tied up next to a large man with a snake tattoo on his neck. This man, Carlos Vega, was a notorious kingpin from Mexico who ran a cross-border human trafficking ring. Michael recognized him from old CIA files. But why would Carlos target Emma? A 17-year-old girl had no connection to the criminal underworld. Michael approached silently, moving like a ghost. He took down a guard with a swift blow to the back of the neck and took his access card. Inside the warehouse, he heard Carlos shouting, "This girl will fetch a high price in Mexico City. Don't let her escape." Michael gripped his knife, his heart pounding, but his mind was ice cold. He knew he wasn't just facing a few thugs, but an entire international criminal network. Suddenly, an explosion erupted from the direction of the ship. A smoke grenade was thrown, blanketing the area. Michael used the smoke as cover, rushing forward to cut Emma's ropes. "Follow me," he whispered. But before they could escape, Carlos appeared, holding an AK-47 mechanic. "Who do you think you are?" Michael pushed Emma behind him and faced Carlos. "Someone who doesn't like to be bothered. Which area are you listening to this story from? And what time is it where you are right now? Leave a comment below so I know you are still healthy and fully focused on this story." My dear friend, we will continue right after this. Thick smoke enveloped the port of Long Beach. The sound of ship horns mingling with the shouts of Carlos Vega's henchmen. Michael Ford pulled Emma Brooks through rows of containers, his heart pounding, but his movements as agile as a hunting leopard. Emma gasped for breath, her legs trembling, but she tried to keep up. "Uncle Michael." "Who are they? Why did they take me?" she asked, her voice cracking with fear. Michael didn't answer. His eyes focused on the path ahead, where the headlights of an SUV cut through the smoke. He pushed Emma behind a container, signaling her to be quiet. 3 men emerged from the darkness, carrying handguns and flashlights, sweeping the area. Michael drew the combat knife from his belt and moved as silently as a shadow. He lunged at the nearest man, locking his arm and breaking his wrist before he could scream. The second man turned, but Michael had already thrown the knife, its steel blade embedding itself in the man's shoulder, causing him to collapse. The third man fired a volley of bullets, but Michael rolled to dodge them, grabbed an iron bar from a scrap heap, and struck the man hard on the head, knocking him unconscious. "Go!" Michael grabbed Emma's hand and ran toward the parking lot. They climbed into the old pickup truck from the garage, and Michael floored the gas, bursting through the port gate. In the rearview mirror, he saw 2 SUVs in pursuit, their headlights blinding. "Hold on tight," he yelled, yanking the steering wheel to avoid a spray of bullets that hit the back of the truck. Emma clutched her seat, her face pale. Michael swerved into a narrow alley in Skid Row, where abandoned buildings stood like silent ghosts. He turned off the truck's lights, letting the darkness hide them. The first SUV sped past, not realizing its prey had vanished. Michael turned to Emma, checking if she was hurt. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, but her eyes were still wide with panic. "What do they want with you?" "Emma, is there anything special?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Emma shook her head. "I don't know, I'm just a normal student." Michael narrowed his eyes, sensing something was wrong, but he had no time to dig deeper. He started the truck and drove toward an old warehouse on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a place he had once used as a safe house during his agent days. Inside the warehouse, the faint light from a single dangling bulb illuminated dust-covered wooden crates. Michael led Emma to a corner and opened a safe hidden behind a loose plank. Inside was a set of communication equipment, handguns, and a military-grade laptop. He turned on the laptop and hacked into the port's camera system to look for clues. The screen showed an image of Carlos Vega yelling into a phone, and behind him was a container with a strange symbol, a snake coiled around a sword. Michael recognized this emblem, the Serpent cartel, an organization that smuggled weapons and people from Mexico City, with ties to the Yakuza in Japan. "They didn't just want to kidnap you," Michael said, his eyes still glued to the screen. This is part of something bigger. Emma hugged herself, trembling. What are you going to do? Michael didn't answer immediately. He picked up a handgun, checked the ammunition, then handed Emma a small knife. Keep this. If I'm not here, protect yourself. Emma looked at the knife, her eyes wide, but she nodded. Suddenly, the roar of an engine echoed outside the warehouse. Michael turned off the light and pulled Emma down to the floor. Through a crack in the door, he saw headlights sweeping across the area. A voice rang out, cold and commanding. Come on out, mechanic, or I'll burn this barn down. Michael recognized Carlos's voice. He had tracked them down faster than expected. Michael signaled for Emma to hide behind the wooden crates, then moved silently to a window. He saw 5 men, 2 carrying rifles and 3 carrying gasoline cans. This was no random chase. They wanted to end things. Michael took a smoke grenade from the safe and threw it out the door. Smoke billowed up, obscuring the area. He burst out, using the darkness to his advantage. He took down a man with a rifle with a punch to the throat. The second man tried to shoot, but Michael spun around, using the man's own rifle to fire back. Screams erupted in the chaos. Michael moved like a ghost, taking down one man after another. But Carlos was not among them. He had finished, leaving a note stuck to the warehouse door. Meet me in Mexico City. Mechanic, or the girl dies. Michael crumpled the note in his fist, rage flaring up inside him. He turned back to see Emma clutching the knife, her eyes red. Are you going to Mexico? She asked. Michael nodded. You stay here. I'll be back. But in his heart, he knew this trip wasn't just about saving Emma. His past as an agent, the secrets he had buried, were all resurfacing, and Carlos Vega was just the tip of an iceberg. A much larger and deeper network that he was about to confront. The helicopter blades roared in the night, cutting through the desert sky near the Mexican border. Michael Ford sat silently in the cabin, his sharp eyes looking down at the flickering lights of Tijuana. He had left Emma Brooks at the Los Angeles warehouse with a trusted old friend, but he still felt uneasy. Carlos Vega's note, meet me in Mexico City, was a challenge, pulling him into a dangerous game he had sworn to avoid. Michael knew that if he didn't act fast, Emma wouldn't be safe for long. The helicopter landed in a desolate field, a few miles from Mexico City. Michael, dressed in a black jacket, carried a backpack containing a handgun, a combat knife, and a tracking device. He rented an old truck from a local smuggler who didn't ask questions when he saw the wad of dollars. The streets of Mexico City unfolded before him, a chaotic mix of neon lights, honking cars, and bustling night markets. Michael parked the truck in an alley near the La Merced district, where Carlos was said to run a secret base. He slipped into the market, blending in with the crowd. The smell of fried tacos and the sound of mariachi music filled the air. But Michael paid no attention. He watched an old building with a rusty iron gate, guarded by 2 men in leather jackets wearing earpieces. Michael recognized the sign of Serpent, the emblem of a snake coiled around a sword painted on the wall. He quietly circled to the back, climbed up a drain pipe, and slipped through a second-floor window. Inside was a warehouse full of wooden crates, the faint smell of gunpowder hanging in the air. This wasn't just human trafficking, they were moving weapons. Michael heard footsteps. He hid behind a crate and saw a large man with a snake tattoo walk by, holding a phone. Carlos wants the shipment delivered to Japan by the end of the week, the man said. Michael made a mental note. Japan was their next destination. But before he could move, a flashlight beam swept across his hiding spot. Who's there? A voice called out. Without hesitation, Michael lunged out and punched the guard in the throat, sending him to the floor. But an alarm blared to life. The entire building erupted with shouts and the sound of guns being loaded. Michael pulled out his handgun and fired 2 shots into the main door's lock, clearing an escape path. But before he could run, a group of 6 men surrounded him, armed with knives and guns. "You've come too far." "Mechanic." One of them sneered. Michael didn't reply, instead throwing a smoke grenade to create a covering mist. He charged in, his combat knife flashing in the dim light. One man's wrist was slashed, and he screamed as his gun fell. A second tried to stab him, but Michael dodged, kicking him hard in the knee and forcing him to buckle. In seconds, 3 men were on the floor, blood pooling around them. But the leader, a muscular man with a scar across his face, raised a rifle and opened fire. Michael rolled behind a crate as bullets chewed into the wood, sending splinters flying. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the corner, sprayed it directly into the scarred man's face, then rushed forward, delivering a series of punches to his chest and face. The man collapsed, unconscious, but the sound of police sirens grew louder in the distance. Michael didn't want to get involved with the local police, who were notoriously in Serpiente's pocket. He searched the scarred man's pockets and found an encrypted phone, quickly unlocking it with his old skills. Michael saw a message: "Move the girl to Tokyo before the mechanic ruins everything." He clenched his fist. Emma was no longer in Mexico. Michael ran out into the alley, jumped into his truck, and sped toward the border. But a black SUV blocked his path, its headlights blinding. 3 figures got out, led by a blonde woman in a red suit, her eyes as cold as a snake's. "Isabella Cruz," she introduced herself, to her voice sharp. "Carlos sent me to deal with you." Michael gave a faint smile, his hand gripping his knife. He sent the wrong person. Isabella gave a signal, and her 2 men rushed him. Michael dodged the first punch, used his knife to slice the strap of the first man's gun holster, then kicked the second man in the stomach. Isabella pulled her own gun, but Michael was faster, throwing his knife and hitting her in the shoulder, making her scream and flee. He didn't give chase. Time was running out. Michael drove across the border, returning to Los Angeles before dawn. The clues about Tokyo and Serpiente swirled in his mind. He knew he was up against not just Carlos, but a much larger network, possibly involving the Japanese Yakuza. But first, he needed to contact an old friend, the only person who could get him into Japan without being detected. Michael looked at the brightening sky and promised himself, "Emma, I will find you." The clue from Mexico City, "Move the girl to Tokyo," haunted him. Emma Brooks was being taken further away from him. And Carlos Vega, the man behind it all, was just one link in a much larger chain. Michael knew he needed help, and there was only one person who could provide it now. He parked in front of a small watch repair shop with a sign that read "Wilson Reed's Clocks." Wilson Reed, a former SEAL operative who had fought alongside Michael on dangerous missions, now lived in seclusion just like him. Michael knocked 3 times on the door. The old code. The door opened, and Wilson appeared, his hair grey, one eye blind from a war wound, but his posture was still solid. "Michael, what kind of trouble are you dragging me into now?" Wilson asked, his deep voice tinged with sarcasm. Michael didn't smile, tossing the encrypted phone from Mexico onto the table. "Serpent, human trafficking, weapons, connected to the Yakuza in Tokyo. They took a girl, Emma Brooks." Wilson frowned, picked up the phone, and scrolled through the messages. "Carlos Vega isn't big enough to be running things with the Yakuza. Someone bigger is behind this." "Michael," he nodded, having suspected as much. Wilson led him down to the basement, where a wall was covered with monitors and surveillance equipment. I've been tracking Serpent for a while. They're not just trafficking people. They're moving high-tech weapons for an organization in Japan. I have the address of a nightclub in Los Angeles where they make their deals. Michael clenched his fists. Take me there. The Velvet Pulse nightclub was in the heart of Hollywood, its neon lights flashing, the electronic music pounding like a heartbeat. Michael, disguised as a delivery driver, wore an old jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He slipped in through the back door, where the smell of alcohol and smoke mingled. Inside, the crowd danced. But Michael's attention was drawn to a secluded corner where a man in a white suit was exchanging a suitcase with a Japanese man who had a Yakuza tattoo on his hand. Michael recognized the mark of Serpent, a snake coiled around a sword, carved into the suitcase. He approached, pretending to be a waiter, and placed a tray of drinks near their table. The man in the white suit, Lucas Hayes, a notorious smuggler in Los Angeles, eyed him with suspicion. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his hand resting on the gun hidden in his jacket. Michael smiled, his voice calm. "Just the man delivering your water?" But as Lucas turned away, Michael moved like lightning, slamming the man onto the table with a knife to his throat. "Tell me, where is Carlos Vega?" Lucas sneered. But his eyes betrayed a flicker of panic. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Suddenly, the nightclub's lights went out. Screams erupted as the crowd descended into chaos. Michael heard swift footsteps. Assassins. He pulled Lucas to the floor, dodging a volley of shots fired from a dark corner. 3 men in black, wearing masks, rushed forward with knives and silenced pistols. Michael threw the metal tray, hitting one man in the head, then lunged at the second, locking his arm and slamming him against the wall. The third man fired, but Michael rolled, grabbed a fallen knife from the floor, and threw it, embedding it in the man's chest. Lucas used the opportunity to escape, but Michael had already secured his suitcase. Inside the suitcase were classified documents, a schematic for an arms shipment from Mexico to Tokyo, and a client list that included the name Takeshi Mori, a Yakuza boss in Japan. Michael photographed the documents and sent them to Wilson via an encrypted message. But before he could leave the nightclub, an explosion rang out. A smoke grenade detonated, obscuring the exit. A tall figure appeared, cloaked in black, their voice cold. "Michael Ford, you're not getting away." It was Isabella Cruz, Carlos's assassin, the one he had encountered in Mexico. Michael didn't answer, drawing his gun and firing repeatedly to clear a path. Isabella dodged swiftly, landing a kick on his hand that sent the gun flying. The two engaged in close combat, trading blows like wild animals. Michael blocked a knife strike from her. He spun around, put her in a chokehold, and slammed her head against the bar. She went down, but not before throwing a dagger that grazed Michael's shoulder, drawing blood. He didn't stop, running outside, jumping onto a parked motorcycle, and speeding off into the Los Angeles night. Returning to the watch shop, Michael bandaged his wound and handed the documents to Wilson. "Takeshi Mori in Tokyo is the one behind this. Emma was taken there." Wilson nodded. "I'll arrange a flight." "But Michael, are you sure you want to take on the Yakuza?" Michael stared out the window, his gaze resolute. There's no turning back. He knew the trip to Japan would be where all secrets were revealed, and that Carlos Vega was just a pawn in Takeshi Mori's game. Michael Ford stood in the shadows of a secluded corner, his baseball cap pulled low to hide his sharp, cold eyes. The wound on his shoulder still burned, but the pain didn't slow him down. After the clash with Isabella Cruz, Michael knew that time to save Emma Brooks was running out. The documents from Lucas Hayes' suitcase pointed to a bigger name, Takeshi Mori, a Yakuza boss in Tokyo, the man behind Serpente's human and arms trafficking ring. But before flying to Japan, Michael needed more information from Los Angeles. He moved through the crowd, disguised as a delivery man with a tray of drinks to avoid attention. The nightclub was packed, thick with the smell of alcohol and perfume. In the VIP corner, a Japanese man, about 40 years old and dressed in a black suit, had a dragon tattoo winding up his arm, a Yakuza sign. It was Kenji Sato, Takeshi Mori's henchman, making a deal with an American named Dylan Carter, Serpente's arms smuggler. Michael drew near, set the tray on the table, and listened. Carlos Vega wants the shipment in Tokyo on schedule, Kenji said in a low voice. If it's late, Mori won't be forgiving. Dylan nodded, handing over a small USB drive. Here's the client list, but I need more money. Michael photographed the USB drive with a phone hidden in his sleeve, then stepped back, pretending to wipe the table. But Kenji's eyes, sharp as knives, scanned him. You're no waiter, Kenji said, pulling a dagger from his jacket. Michael didn't reply, instead flipping the table for cover, sending glasses shattering. The crowd panicked, screaming. Dylan drew a gun and fired twice. But Michael rolled out of the way, grabbed a broken bottle, and threw it, hitting Dylan's hand and making him drop the gun. Kenji lunged, his dagger flashing. Michael dodged, grabbed his wrist, twisted it back, and the dagger clattered to the floor. He punched Kenji square in the face, sending him sprawling into a chair. But the nightclub erupted into chaos. 4 of Kenji's bodyguards, dressed in black, stormed in with silenced pistols. Michael grabbed Dylan as a human shield. Using him to block a spray of bullets, he picked up Kenji's knife and threw it, hitting one bodyguard in the chest, then charged the second, kicking him hard in the stomach and sending him crashing into the bar. The third man fired, a bullet grazing Michael's shoulder and reopening his old wound. Gritting his teeth, he vaulted over the counter, smashed a bottle over the fourth man's head, then fired back with a recovered gun, taking down the last one. The crowd scattered as police sirens wailed in the distance. Michael grabbed the still-dazed Kenji and dragged him into a back room of the nightclub. He tied him to a chair and pointed a gun at his head. Where is Emma Brooks? Where in Tokyo is Takeshi Mori holding her? Kenji sneered, blood trickling from his nose. You won't survive the night. Mechanic. Michael didn't waste words, grabbing a bucket of ice water from the bar and dumping it on Kenji's face. Talk, or I'll make you drink the whole thing. Kenji coughed and sputtered, finally breaking, she's in a warehouse in Shinjuku, Tokyo, but you'll never get in. Michael photographed the information from Kenji's phone, then knocked him unconscious. He slipped out the back door, avoiding the police squad swarming in. On his motorcycle, Michael sped through the streets of Hollywood, the city lights blurring into streaks. He called Wilson Reed, his voice tense. Shinjuku, Tokyo. I need a plane ticket and a new identity. Wilson replied, already on it. But Michael, the Yakuza aren't like Serpente. Takeshi Mori is a different kind of beast. Michael hung up, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He knew Tokyo would be a battlefield, and Emma wasn't the only victim in this game. Back at Wilson's watch shop, Michael checked his equipment: a handgun, a dagger, and a small listening device. Wilson handed him a fake passport with the name James Carter. You'll enter Japan as a businessman. I've contacted someone in Tokyo who can help you get to Mori. Michael nodded, but his heart was heavy. He wasn't just worried about Emma, but also about his own daughter, Lily Ford, who was being cared for by her grandfather in Los Angeles. If Serpent or Takeshi Mori found out about Lily, she would be in danger. Michael clenched his fists, determined to end this before it was too late. A light rain fell on the forests on the outskirts of Tokyo, the mist-shrouded mountains seeming to hide a deadly secret. Michael fought, under the false identity of James Carter, stepped out of a worn-out taxi, a backpack slung over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the quiet woods. He had arrived in Japan. Carrying the clue from Kenji Sato, Emma Brooks was being held in a warehouse in Shinjuku, under the control of the Yakuza boss Takeshi Mori. But before heading into the city center, Michael had to meet a contact, the only person who could lead him to Mori's stronghold. In the forest, a small wooden house came into view, a faint yellow light shining through its window. Michael knocked. Using the code from Wilson Reed, a Japanese woman, about 30 years old, opened the door. She was Aiko Tanaka, a former hacker for the Tokyo police, now a freelancer. "Are you the mechanic?" Aiko asked, her voice cold, but her eyes curious. Michael nodded and stepped inside. The walls were covered with screens and maps, and a corner was piled high with electronic equipment. Aiko handed him a USB drive. The layout of the Shinjuku warehouse. Mori is holding not just the girl, but many other victims. But you must be careful. The Yakuza here are not like Serpent. Michael studied the map, memorizing every entrance and exit. Aiko added more details. Takeshi Mori not only trafficked people, but also supplied high-tech weapons to underground organizations worldwide. Emma was bait to lure a major client from Europe. Michael clenched his fist, anger flaring within him. But he kept his voice calm. "Take me there." Aiko shook her head. "It's not that simple. The road to Shinjuku goes through this forest, and Mori has assassins guarding it." Michael gave a faint smile. "I'm familiar with assassins." Under the rain, Michael and Aiko moved through the forest, a dim flashlight beam guiding their way. Suddenly, a dark figure lunged from the bushes, a knife flashing. Michael pushed Aiko back, dodged the slash, and punched the attacker squarely in the face. The man fell, but three more dark figures appeared, dressed like ninjas, moving as fast as the wind. Michael drew his dagger to face them. One threw a shuriken. Michael rolled as the steel blade grazed his ear. He charged forward, slicing the weapon strap of the first man, then kicked the second hard in the chest, sending him crashing into a tree. The third used a katana, unleashing a flurry of strikes. Michael parried with his dagger. Steel, clashing against steel, sending sparks flying. Espon locked the man's arm, broke his wrist, and then knocked him unconscious. Aiko, standing behind him, clapped softly. Not bad for a mechanic, but Michael wasn't smiling. He searched the pocket of one of the assassins and found a communication device with Carlos Vega's voice on it. "Don't let the mechanic get to Shinjuku," Carlos ordered. Michael narrowed his eyes. Carlos was still on his tail, even from halfway across the world. He handed the device to Aiko. "Hack it. I need to know where Mori is." They continued deeper into the forest until they reached a road leading into Shinjuku. An old warehouse appeared, dimly lit and guarded by 5 Yakuza members armed with rifles. Michael signaled for Aiko to stay back, then slipped inside, moving like a ghost. He took down one guard with a chop to the back of the neck and took his key card. Inside the warehouse, the smell of machine oil and the sound of whimpering filled the air. Michael saw dozens of girls tied up, their eyes filled with fear. Emma was in a far corner, her hair a mess. But her gaze was still defiant. He cut her bonds, whispering, "It's me. Emma, don't be afraid." But before they could escape, the warehouse lights flared on. A group of 10 Yakuza surrounded them, led by Hiroshi Kato, Takeshi Mori's personal guard. "Mechanic, did you come all this way just to die?" Hiroshi sneered, drawing his katana. Michael pushed Emma behind him and drew his handgun. "I'm not the one who's going to die." He fired 2 shots, taking down 2 men, then charged at Hiroshi. The katana blade swung down. Michael dodged, blocked with his dagger, then kicked the man's knee. Hiroshi fell, but the rest of the Yakuza rushed forward. Michael threw a smoke grenade, pulled Emma toward an exit, and ran. Bullets followed, but he used a crate as a shield and got her outside. In the forest, Aiko was waiting with a car. "Get in." "Quick!" she shouted. Michael pushed Emma into the car and sped off. But an SUV gave chase. Fearing burst after burst, Michael swerved the wheel, dodging bullets, then threw a flashbang grenade out the back, causing the SUV to flip over. He looked at Emma, checking on her. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded, her eyes red. "Uncle Michael, they're not going to stop." "Are they?" Michael didn't answer, his gaze fixed on Tokyo. He knew Takeshi Mori was still waiting, and this war was far from over. The Los Angeles sky turned a brilliant orange as the sun set. But inside Michael Fort, there was only tension. He drove an old truck, with Emma Brooks sitting beside him, still trembling after the escape from Shinjuku. They had just fled Tokyo on a red-eye flight back to Los Angeles, but Michael knew the danger wasn't over. Takeshi Mori, the Yakuza boss, and Carlos Vega's Serpent network were hunting them. A clue from Aiko Tanaka had revealed a larger conspiracy. Mori wasn't just trafficking people, but was also collaborating with an underground organization in the U.S., possibly with government ties. Michael took Emma to Wilson Reed's watch shop in Koreatown. Wilson was waiting, his eyes worried. "You brought the Yakuza here?" "Michael," he asked, checking his surveillance equipment. Michael placed a stack of documents from Tokyo on the table. Mori's client list, which featured a prominent name, Richard Blake, a high-ranking official in Los Angeles suspected of laundering money for Serpent. "This is more than just trafficking," Michael said in a low voice. "They're manipulating the entire system." Emma, sitting in a corner of the room, spoke up. "Uncle Michael, I heard them talking about a big shipment at the port of Long Beach. It has something to do with Richard Blake." Michael narrowed his eyes. He remembered that first night at the port, when he rescued Emma from Carlos Vega. Long Beach was Serpent's shipping hub. "Wilson, check the port. I need to know what that shipment is." Wilson hacked into the port's camera system, and the screen displayed an image of a container marked with the symbol of a snake coiled around a sword. "High-tech weapons," Wilson said. "Laser rifles. Surveillance gear, the kind only the U.S. military uses. If Blake is involved, you're up against an entire political network." Michael nodded, but his gaze shifted to Emma. "You stay here with Wilson. I have to protect Lily." His daughter, Lily Ford, was with her grandfather, Thomas Grant, in the suburbs of Los Angeles. If Mori or Carlos found out about Lily, she would become a target. Michael drove to Thomas's house, a mansión in Pasadena. Thomas, a former military officer, opened the door with a cold stare. "You've brought trouble here again." "Michael," he said, alluding to the death of his daughter, Michael's wife. for which he blamed him. Lily ran out and threw her arms around her father. "Daddy, where have you been for so long?" Michael knelt and hugged his daughter, unable to tell her the truth. Daddy had some work to do. "Sweetie," he looked at Thomas, "keep Lily safe. I'll handle this." That night, Michael returned to the port of Long Beach, hiding behind the shipping containers. He saw a group of people, led by Richard Blake. Overseeing the transfer of a container, Carlos Vega appeared and spoke with Blake. Michael planted a listening device and recorded their conversation. "Mori wants the shipment in Tokyo by next week," Carlos said, "but that mechanic is getting in the way." Blake sneered. "Let me handle him. He's just a dog barking up the wrong tree." Michael didn't wait any longer. He threw a smoke grenade, blanketing the area. Carlos's henchmen panicked, firing blindly. Michael burst out, taking down one man with a blow to the neck, then used his dagger to slash the wrist of a second, making him drop his gun. Carlos drew his weapon, but Michael was faster, kicking the gun out of his hand and punching him squarely in the face, knocking him to the ground. Blake escaped, jumping into an SUV. Michael didn't give chase. He had recorded enough evidence to expose Blake. But as Michael turned back to his vehicle, an explosion rocked the port. A grenade detonated nearby, sending shrapnel flying everywhere. Michael rolled, dodging gunfire from a new group of assassins in black gear and masks. Leading them was Isabella Cruz, Serpiente's assassin, her eyes as cold as ice. "You're hard to kill, mechanic," she said, holding a rifle. Michael dodged a spray of bullets, vaulted over a container, and threw his knife, hitting one of the assassins in the shoulder. He charged at Isabella, locking her arm, but she kicked him back. They fought in close quarters, trading blows like animals. Michael finally pinned Isabella down and knocked her unconscious. But he didn't kill her. He needed her alive to get more information about Mori. Michael ran back to his car, his heart pounding. He called Wilson. "Lily could be in danger. Blake knows I'm hunting them." Wilson replied, "I've already sent someone to protect Lily." "But Michael, Mori just ordered a hit on you in Mexico City. He knows you're getting close." Michael gripped the steering wheel, his eyes burning with intensity. He had to go back to Mexico to sever the link between Serpiente and Mori before they could get to Lily and Emma. The Mexico City sky burned blood red, the sunset casting its light on the dusty streets of the slums. Michael Ford sat in a borrowed truck, his eyes scanning the La Merced district, where Carlos Vega ran a secondary base for Serpiente. After discovering Richard Blake's connection to Takeshi Mori, Michael knew his time to save Emma Brooks and protect his daughter. Lily Ford was running out. He had received word from Wilson Reed. Carlos was preparing to move a large shipment of weapons in Mexico City, and Emma might be used as a hostage to force Henry Brooks's cooperation. Michael stopped the truck near an old warehouse with peeling walls and a rusty iron door. He wore a baseball cap and a black jacket, concealing a handgun and a dagger. Through a listening device from Wilson, he knew Carlos was meeting with his henchmen inside. Michael slipped through an alley, climbed onto the warehouse roof, and peered through a crack in the broken glass. Inside, Carlos stood among a group of Yakuza and mercenaries, in front of a container filled with laser guns and surveillance equipment. "Mori wants the shipment in Tokyo on time," Carlos yelled. "If the mechanic interferes, kill the girl." Michael clenched his fists, rage flaring within him. He planted a small explosive device in a ventilation duct and detonated it remotely. The explosion rocked the warehouse, sending smoke and flames everywhere, causing the henchmen to panic. Michael leaped down from the roof, taking out 2 guards with his dagger, its steel blade glinting in the firelight. He charged into the warehouse, firing 3 shots from his handgun. dropping 3 Yakuza. Carlos drew his weapon and fired back. But Michael rolled behind the container as bullets sparked against the metal. In the chaos, Michael saw Emma tied up in a corner of the warehouse. Her eyes filled with fear but still resilient. He cut her ropes and pulled her behind a crate. "It's me." "Emma, don't be afraid." But before they could escape, a group of 5 mercenaries, led by Isabella Cruz, blocked the exit. "Mechanic, you're as persistent as a leech." Isabella sneered, holding a rifle. Michael didn't answer, instead throwing a smoke grenade to cover the area. He rushed forward, kicking the gun out of one man's hands and punching a second in the face. Isabella opened fire, but Michael dodged, using his dagger to slash a third man's wrist, making him scream. The fight was a whirlwind. Michael took down 3 mercenaries with his fists and knife, but Isabella landed a kick to his chest. Forcing him back, she swung a knife, aiming for Michael's neck, but he blocked it, locked her arm, and slammed her head against the container. Isabella crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Michael pulled Emma toward the back door, but Carlos blocked their path, holding an AK-47. "You're not getting away." "Mechanic," he roared, firing a burst of rounds. Michael pushed Emma behind him, rolled, grabbed an iron bar from the floor, and threw it, hitting Carlos's hand and making him drop the gun. Michael rushed forward, landing a series of punches on Carlos's face. But the kingpin backed away. Drawing a dagger, the 2 engaged in close combat, their knives clashing with sparks. Michael dodged a slash and kicked Carlos in the knee, forcing him down. He put Carlos in a chokehold, squeezing tight, but didn't kill him. "Where is the other girl?" talk, gasping for air. Carlos confessed. Mori took her to Shinjuku. "You'll die if you go there." Michael knocked him unconscious, pulled Emma outside, and jumped into the truck. But as the truck left the warehouse, a black SUV gave chase. Firing burst after burst, Michael spun the steering wheel, dodging bullets. But a tire was hit, causing the truck to swerve. He stopped the vehicle and pushed Emma down onto the seat. "Stay down," he drew his pistol and fired back, taking down 2 men in the SUV, but then an explosion roared. A grenade from a second vehicle. Michael leaped from the truck, pulling Emma into an alley. He called Wilson. "Lily isn't here." Mori took her to Tokyo. "I need a plane." "Now," Wilson replied. "It's ready." "But, Michael, Lily could be in danger." "Blake knows you're hunting them." Michael looked at Emma, his heart heavy. He took her to Wilson's watch shop and left her in his care. "Keep her safe. I'm going to Tokyo." Emma took his hand, her eyes red. "Be careful." "Uncle Michael." Michael nodded. But inside him, fear for Lily was a raging fire. He knew Takeshi Mori didn't just want Emma. He was targeting his entire family for revenge. Michael got on a motorcycle and sped into the Los Angeles night, preparing for the final battle in Japan. Michael Ford walked silently, his black coat blending into the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning every street corner. He had returned to Japan, determined to end everything. After the clash in Mexico City, Michael knew Emma Brooks was being held by Takeshi Mori, the Yakuza boss, in a secret warehouse in Shinjuku. But this time, he wasn't just rescuing Emma, he had to protect his own daughter, Lily Ford, from the clutches of Serpent and Mori. Michael contacted Aiko Tanaka, a hacker in Tokyo, through an encrypted device. "The warehouse is on the edge of Shinjuku, near Kabukicho Station," Aiko said through his earpiece. "But Mori has increased security. There are at least 20 Yakuza, and Isabella Cruz is there too. Michael nodded, checking the Beretta handgun and the dagger hidden in his jacket. He knew this was his most dangerous battle, but there was no turning back. He approached the warehouse under the cover of night, avoiding the streetlights. The old building, with its stained concrete walls, was guarded by 5 Yakuza armed with rifles. Michael threw a stone to create a diversion. When one of the guards turned, he rushed forward, striking the back of his neck and taking him down silently. He took the access card and slipped inside. The air inside was thick with the smell of machine oil and gunpowder. Dozens of girls were held in iron cages, their eyes filled with despair. Michael found Emma, tied up in a corner, her face pale but still struggling. He cut her bonds and whispered, "It's me. Emma, don't make a sound." But suddenly, the lights flashed on. A group of Yakuza, led by Hiroshi Kato, Mori's personal guard, appeared. "Mechanic, you really are persistent." Hiroshi sneered. Holding a katana, Michael pushed Emma behind him and drew his gun. "You made a mistake picking a fight with me." He fired 3 shots, taking down 2 Yakuza. But Hiroshi dodged swiftly. Swinging his sword, Michael rolled, blocking the katana blade with his dagger, sending sparks flying. He kicked Hiroshi in the chest, forcing him back, but the other Yakuza charged. Michael threw a smoke grenade, shrouding the area, then pulled Emma toward an exit. They ran down a narrow hallway, bullets flying behind them. Michael fired back, taking down 3 more men, but a bullet grazed his arm, drawing blood. He gritted his teeth and pushed Emma into a small room, locking the door. "Hide here. I'll be back." Emma nodded, her eyes red. Michael turned to face 4 Yakuza. He charged in, his knife and gun working together like a machine. One man was shot in the shoulder. Another had his throat cut, and the remaining 2 fell to his punches and kicks. But then heavy footsteps echoed. Isabella Cruz appeared, holding a rifle, her eyes like a viper's. "This time you die." "Mechanic." Michael didn't reply, throwing his knife and hitting Isabella's hand, making her drop the rifle. He lunged forward, and the 2 engaged in fierce hand-to-hand combat. Isabella threw a kick at Michael's chest, but he caught her leg, spun, and slammed her against a wall. She collapsed, unconscious. Michael didn't stop, running deeper into the warehouse to find Takeshi Mori. He knew the boss was here, and the final battle was about to begin. Michael burst into a large room, its walls covered with weapons and surveillance monitors. Emma was no longer there. She had been moved somewhere else. Michael clenched his fists, rage boiling over. He checked the screens and saw an image of his daughter, Lily Ford, being held in another room in Shinjuku. Mori knew about Lily and was using her to trap him. Michael ran out, but an explosion roared. A grenade went off, collapsing the main exit. He leaped over the rubble, charged down a hallway, and took down 2 more Yakuza with his knife and gun. At the end of the hall, Michael saw a steel door. He broke the lock and stepped inside to see Lily tied to a chair, her eyes filled with fear. "Dad," she cried out. Michael cut her ropes and hugged her, but a cold laugh echoed through the room. "Right on time." "Mechanic." Takeshi Mori stood in the corner of the room, with Carlos Vega beside him, both holding guns. Michael pushed Lily behind him, his eyes blazing. "Let her go, or you both die." Carlos sneered, but Michael didn't let him say another word. He threw his knife, hitting Carlos's hand and making him drop his gun. Mori fired, but Michael rolled, picked up Carlos's weapon, and fired back. Hitting Mori in the shoulder, he fell but still managed to activate a device. A beep sounded. A 12-second countdown appeared on a screen. Michael calmly watched Mori, his eyes like a predator hunting its prey. Mori laughed maniacally. You can't escape, but with 3 seconds left? Michael lunged, locking Mori in a hold, snapping his wrist, then punching him hard in the face, knocking him out. Michael disabled the device just in time, saving Lily and Emma, who was being held nearby. Michael pulled Lily and Emma outside, dodging the last of the Yakuza. He got them into Eiko's car, which sped off into the Shinjuku night. But he knew Takeshi Mori was not dead, and the battle was not truly over. Heavy rain fell, blurring his vision. But Michael's gaze was sharp and focused. He had just rescued Emma and Lily from Takeshi Mori's warehouse, but the Yakuza boss was still alive, and the Serpent network had not been dismantled. Michael knew the final battle awaited him, and Mori would not let him leave Tokyo easily. The car stopped in an empty lot near Kabukicho Station, where Eiko had arranged a safe meeting point. Take Emma and Lily away, Michael said, his voice low. Eiko nodded, but Lily clung to him. Dad? Don't go. They'll kill you, Michael knelt, placing his hands on his daughter's shoulders. I promise I'll come back. Lily, trust me. He gave her an old CIA pin, a symbol of his promise. Emma looked at him, her eyes red. Thank you, Uncle Michael. He nodded, then turned and disappeared into the rain. Eiko provided the final coordinates, an abandoned tower on the edge of Shinjuku where Takeshi Mori was hiding. Michael got on a motorcycle and sped through the dark alleys, the rain lashing his face. The tower loomed ahead, its broken glass windows like the teeth of a monster. He slipped in through a basement entrance, taking down 2 Yakuza guards with his dagger, his movements as swift as a ghost. Inside, the hallway was pitch black, filled with the sound of dripping water and the smell of metal. Michael planted a listening device and heard Mori's voice over the radio. Find the mechanic. He's not getting away. Michael moved deeper into the tower, bypassing traps like tripwires and surveillance cameras. He hacked the system with a device from Eiko, disabling the cameras. On the top floor, he saw Mori standing before a control console, surrounded by 6 Yakuza with rifles. Carlos Vega was also there, his face swollen from their previous fight, a pistol in his hand. You came here to die. Mechanic. Carlos Ruarid. Michael didn't answer. Throwing a smoke grenade that filled the room, he charged in, firing 3 shots and taking down 2 Yakuza. Carlos fired back, but Michael rolled, slashed a man's throat with his dagger, and then kicked down a second. Mori activated a large screen, and a 12-second countdown appeared, linked to bombs planted throughout the tower. You can't save anyone. Mechanic Mori laughed maniacally, grabbing a katana and charging. Michael watched him calmly, his eyes like a predator. With 9 seconds left, he dodged the katana's blade and punched Mori in the chest, forcing him back. 6 seconds. Michael locked Mori's arm, snapping his wrist, and the sword fell. 3 seconds. He punched Mori hard in the face, knocking him to the ground. Unconscious. Michael rushed to the control panel, entered a code from Eiko's device, and disarmed the bombs with 1 second to spare. But Carlos suddenly charged, holding a knife to Michael's throat. You lose, he screamed. Michael twisted, slamming his elbow into Carlos's face, then kicked him in the stomach, sending him over the railing to the floor below. Motionless, Michael gasped for breath, blood seeping from his old wound. But he didn't stop. He tied up Mori, took his phone, and sent all the evidence on Serpent and Richard Blake to Wilson Reed. Send it to the FBI. Michael said into his earpiece, "Let's end this." Michael left the tower as the rain continued to fall. He met Aiko, Emma, and Lily at the rendezvous point. Lily ran to him, throwing her arms around him. "You did it?" Dad Michael smiled for the first time in days. He took Emma back to Henry Brooks in Los Angeles, where the family was reunited in tears. Wilson reported that Richard Blake had been arrested thanks to Michael's evidence, and Serpent was dismantled. But Maury had escaped during the chaos, leaving a message, "I'll be back." Mechanic. Michael took Lily to her grandfather, Thomas Grant's house. Promising to win custody of her soon, he stood under a Los Angeles streetlight, looking up at the night sky, knowing that Maury was still a threat. But now, he was no longer running from his past. He was Michael Ford, an agent who had once sworn to live a peaceful life, but who was ready to fight for the ones he loved.